Well, again, thank you for joining this evening. Our practice sitting, such a curious practice that we're engaged in, still sitting. With all of the Buddha's study, if we look back to the Buddha as the founder of Dharma practice, meditation was the key practice, although he engaged in many other practices. When other practices had been exhausted, when all had been lost in his quest, it was the simple practice of sitting on the ground in stillness which brought him to realization. So that's whatever the Dharma practice, whether it's a traditional lineage or whether it's a secular approach. In my experience, nothing beats the surety of meditation practice. It has a glacial pace, in which if you sit like a mountain, so you kind of sit up like the San Jacinto Mountains do, um, don't mind the weather. Mountains don't worry about the weather. We shouldn't be too concerned about the rising and falling of thought and feeling. That's like the weather. We sit that way, like a mountain. Then we can really come into contact with our roots, with this mysterious nature that we all are, that we're all appearing as, which is really very mysterious and profound that we're all here in contact, seeing one another like in this way. I wanted to reach back again, no surprises this week, just reach back to Tang Dynasty China, which I continue to mine endlessly for these for koans and recollections. Although it's so long ago, they brilliantly address the human condition in its complexity and Buddha nature in its simplicity, and weave those two principles together brilliantly. So this particular koan is in several collections, and it's both in the Book of Equanimity. It's also in the Gateless Gate collection. It might also be in the Blue Cliff. I'm not sure. Um, and it figures a couple of characters. Our an old friend Joshu, who's considered perhaps the probably the most high regarded Zen master in any tradition. It would be Master Joshu. Um, Dogen, many centuries later, would call Joshu affectionately the old Buddha. And if you get called an old Buddha, that's a real compliment. And they don't, Zen teachers they don't hand out the title Buddha um, easily. So Joshi was really very highly regarded. It said that he had a lips and tongue Zen, which meant that he was very good with words and expression, particularly in an era in which sometimes words were um, would could be distrusted. In Zen, that's still so. We can put things into words, but words never really reach the depths of our experience. So words can be very useful, but hard to really get to the heart of things. So Joshua is one of our characters here. The other is an unnamed shopkeeper who had an elderly lady who had a small shop at the foot of a mountain in the Five Mountains region, and one of the mountains was Mount Tai, which means Mount Wisdom. And the legend was that Manjushri, the Buddha, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, lived on top of this mountain on Mount Tai. So in those days, it was something of a pilgrimage. tourist attraction for Buddhists to take the trek and go on pilgrimage, go on the hike to Mount Tai. And the lady had a shop near Mount Tai in which she sold a kind of biscuit or cake, which was like a fortified, which is really good for pilgrimage, something um, you know, somewhere between a kind bar and Lembas from Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you like Tolkien universe like I do, you'll know what Lembas is, but sold these little cakes. And so she would meet people who would come on pilgrimage and often ask the way. It said that her little store, you can imagine it like a taco truck of the Tang Dynasty, right? It was pulled up at a crossroads, and but so it wasn't quite clear of the path to this mountain, so people would stop in and ask her the way to Mount Tai, or the way to Mount Wisdom. And this is where the koan comes in. It says, let me see. So attention. There was an elderly shopkeeper on the road to Great Mountain, to Wisdom Mountain. Sometimes a monk would ask, what is the way to Wisdom Mountain? And she would reply, straight ahead. The monk would proceed on a little, and then the old woman would say, huh, a fine monk going on like that again. This happened to several monks. The monks then related this to the Zen teacher Joshu. And Joshu said, wait here and I'll examine her for you. Joshu went to the shopkeeper and asked the same question. And the shopkeeper gave the same answer. The next day, Joshu ascended to the teaching seat and said, for all of your sakes, I've seen through this old shopkeeper for you. So it's a curious koan here, and considered quite a difficult one, because there's something going. There's part of the drama here is hidden. It's a recollection of Joshu who just comes back and says, "Yeah, I've seen through this. I've seen through this person for you. So what's going on?" I think it was the last time, when it was a Tuesday or a Sunday, but also brought up a koan featuring a female teacher here, which sadly often they are unnamed, part of the misogynistic legacy of the kind of the culture, quite frankly. Um, but it's good to bring up here. Um, so we have the first word is always attention. It's always attention in these koans. Why do I bring these koans up? Well, I think they're at least a good yarn, a good short story, right? But it's dealing beyond, much more beyond that. It's dealing with these principles that we encounter in our human nature, like the word wisdom. What is wisdom? I like to go to the dictionary and look it up, so I don't drag too much of my own bias in. And I say I think it's in Webster. This is the Oxford Dictionary. Being a Brit, I like the Oxford Dictionary over Merriam's or Webster's, sorry, right? And it says wisdom here is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. I like that definition. The quality of having experience. Experience comes first, then knowledge, and then good judgment. Said to be the quality of being wise, the definition of wisdom. So we have these monks who are going off to try to find wisdom. In one sense, that's the practice of their lives. They're monks and nuns who have joined a practice community, a sangha, and they've given their lives to exploring wisdom and compassion or to seek enlightenment and emancipation from the dukkha or dissatisfactoriness of the human condition. And so they're going looking for wisdom. And one they go on this pilgrimage. So you can imagine this elderly shopkeeper who's seen 1,000 people coming through on pilgrimage to go to Mount Wisdom. Someone who's lived a long life, running a shop. Now, if you ever, of course, for those of you, if you run a small business, yeah, that's a big lift. That's a big project. You have to have some wisdom right there, right? To be an entrepreneur, you have to understand the market, whatever job or role that we're in our careers, whether we own it or we're an employee. This is someone who's run this run this place for some years, seen a lot of practitioners coming through, and enjoys prodding and messing with people, but perhaps in an effort to spur people to also a deeper realization and not to rest on their laurels. So you imagine this monk comes in and says, "What is the way to Mount Wisdom?" And the elderly shopkeeper says, "Straight ahead." That's our answer here. What is the way to wisdom? Go straight ahead. And if we relate that to our lives, the practice of our lives, when we're seeking experience or we are experiencing or being experienced by the world, practice, Dharma practice or life practice, shorn of the word Dharma even, is a matter of going straight ahead. Going straight ahead. Moving into the next. Life is moving. Time is moving. There's a sense that arrow of time runs forward, at least in this sphere of existence. We're moving forward and reality is unfolding. There's a sense of motion to our days. The day the sun comes up in the morning, goes down in the evening, another day, and open a new window on the Advent calendar, right? And things move forward. There is that sense of movement or unfolding that's going place. Now, how do we navigate that? How do we navigate? The old lady, the elderly lady here says, just go straight ahead. And then we have our monks say, okay, go straight ahead. Could be literal, that's the way to the mountain. But just as they set off on their path, a voice says to them, huh, a fine priest going on like that again. Now, why does this person do this? How is that taken? That's the road to wisdom that way. And then as soon as they start to walk, a kind of a tisk or a little like, oh dear, there you go. There's that some just going off like that. And how would a person take that? This really like this koan can strike us as how do we take praise and blame? How are we influenced or moved around by the words and the commentary of others? And one of Tenshin, my teacher, one of his successors, so I guess a Dharma brother of mine, he would bring a lot of monks from South America with him to Japan. He practiced for many years in Japan, and he had a practice in Chile, and he would bring a lot of monks from Chile and Argentina, Zen practitioners, and bring them to Japan to practice with Tangen Roshi. And he said he brought these a lot of monks one time to the session, and at the end of the session, they said the teacher called him up for the photo at the end and said, "Come stand next to me." So he brought him up next to him, and they had the nice photo at the end, and he felt very good about that. The next session, the next retreat, he brings a lot, more people back to that temple in Japan, and This time he walks to go stand next to his teacher for the photo, and his teacher stops him and says, "What are you doing? No, 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 no. You take the photograph." And this time he makes him take the photograph and he's not even in it. And he said he told me he was very disturbed by this. Like, what had he done wrong? And maybe he was too full of himself. There was like the expectation that he's the big man now. He's going to be next to the boss and have a nice picture. But he said he never got to the bottom of it. And the enduring lesson that he took from it was, sometimes you stand next to you're in the center of the picture, and another time you're not in the picture. Sometimes you receive some praise and appreciation. Sometimes you receive some contempt and some derision. But really, how much are we moved around by this? If wisdom is something, some goal, like if enlightenment is a goal or something we're moving toward, then that voice that says, uh-oh, going off like that by this shopkeeper can really bring up a lot of doubt. Can a lot of koans, particularly featuring this teacher Joshu, are about arousing doubt in order to not rest on an idea. So we have in this mountain, this Mount Tai, the Wisdom Mountain. There were maps, of course, in that era. I love to see. I sometimes I follow a thing on a website it's like ancient maps, and it shows maps from centuries ago, and they're really cool because you see like early maps of North America or Europe and Asia, all countries, and how they've changed over the years. Right, it's from these like a little bit of guesswork early on, or like the rough shape or something. So you'd have these maps. And now, of course, with Google Earth and everything else and GPS, the maps have been brought to like just amazing in terms of accuracy. And we begin to rely more and more on the map. We rely on the map much more than our experience. A good friend of mine, he said he was driving with his partner, and he's following the maps like Apple Map or Waze or whatever it is, and it says, and they're looking for this place, and it says it's a mile on the left, and then his partner says, no, it's right there across the street, and he says, no, just shh, it's this. Hold on, and he goes to turn left, and his partner said, no, 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 it's right here, and he's like, will you be? And then he looks, and no, it's literally right here. You can see it through the window. But because the map, we've got wed to the map, following the map. That happened at Yokoji. We were sitting in the meditation hall, and we hear this noise, and a car goes by squealing and bouncing up the fire road long after the road has ended for where you drive, in a Mini Cooper. Like, it's like The Italian Job. If you ever saw the old movie The Italian Job, they're sort of bouncing up, and I had to go out and like go after them, and I flagged them down, and I showed the gel, and I said, "Whoa!" I said, "You've passed it," and he said, "No, I haven't. I'm on the. It was on the map. It said Yokoji were where our wells were. They've since fixed it, but this is. I'm not sure. Maybe you could like sort of relate to this for leaning on the map too much. Buddhism is a map. The Dharma is a map. It doesn't have an existential reality that it's hidden somewhere that we're tracking toward, but rather it's a lens or a method, a wonderful map in order to explore the human condition for ourselves without an intermediary, to see what causes suffering and difficulty, this dukkha or dissatisfactoriness, and then to be able to transform that dissatisfaction, and to be able to learn to gain greater freedom and flexibility. Right? And so we use the map. The monks are all, in this case, are all using a map. They joined a temple. They join a way. They follow the teachings of the Buddha and follow the teachings of the Dharma. But if we rely on it too heavily, and then we can mistake the map for the actual reality of experience, our own experience. That's what, in this sense, wisdom. We trust this in this, the wisdom, our experience, the knowledge which we realize or gain therein. So wisdom and knowledge. And what was our third one? And good judgment. And good judgment to become wise. And so even through our lived experience over the years, through trial and error, we learn to apply and refine judgment through our experience. And we understand that reality, because reality isn't fixed, isn't defined, then every reality that we enter going straight ahead, it's new territory. Our lives we're always breaking new ground and exploring new territory. We can be informed by prior experience, helping to inform the present experience. But if prior experience puts walls up around us, like life has to look a certain way because of what's happened prior, then we're going to move out of sync with reality. Wisdom isn't a static or a fixed thing, but it is rather an open system that's being realized in our momentary experience in this way. But if we're following, we think wisdom is something, or enlightenment is something, or the Dharma is something, then this elderly shopkeeper who says, huh, what a shame going off like that. Wait, what? You said it's straight ahead. What's wrong with that? What do you mean? What's the secret? What are you pointing at? And so they go back to Joshu, something with a little bit with their perhaps like kind of tail between the legs. There's this person who's prodding and like bringing up this doubt. Joshu says, well, I'll go talk with her for you. Perhaps he is simply fancied, this is nice. He fancied a day out. Maybe it was all arranged beforehand. But Joshu sets out to speak to this shopkeeper. In the preface, which is the introduction to this case, it says, there is grass, and this is the preface talks to the main point. It says, there is grasping and releasing. A wooden pole accompanies the body. Right. So I talked about that way the Dharma or Buddhism as a map. In this pointer, it's appearing as a wooden pole. There is a wooden pole accompanies the body. You can imagine these people here going on pilgrimage. Typically, they would have a staff. Actually, there's a staff behind me up against the wall. That's a Shiho staff. When you receive Dharma transmission in the Zen tradition, you get a staff, right? It's still a traditional, don't use it much. You just lean it up in the corner of a wall. But in these days, people would literally use it to go out on pilgrimage. It's useful for if, predators approach or bandits, you've got something to defend yourself with, but also for crossing rivers. Right? For crossing rivers, it's good to have a staff that you can put in ahead of you and test the water, test the depths, right? Because if you take a slip in a mountain creek in China, your iPhone is not going to, alert the authorities, right? You're just going to be, no one's coming, right? So in this case, a wooden pole accompanies the body. Our practice in this way is the teachings of the Dharma, the teachings of Buddhism, are a wonderful support to the body. all of this teaching is a wonderful support. We can, you know, I'm going to join on a Sunday or join on a Tuesday. That's like I'm going to use the support of of each other in our community, like a solid, like a good walking stick to help me on this journey, this unique journey of exploration. But the wooden staff of a walking stick here, it can't, it's a support, but it doesn't have the answers to what's lying ahead. We're finding out those answers as we go forward. Right? So Joshu goes off to check it out for himself. The next line of the preface says, "The scale's handle is held in the hand." Tell me what state of mind is this? The scale's handle is held in the hand. It's like when we're moving through reality, weighing conditions and circumstance. How should I respond? What should I do? If you hold a scale in the hand, the scale's nice and even. In fact, it's going to wobble a bit, it's going to move around. You can't really ever get it quite to stick, but you're going to have like an even scale. But if you put your finger on the scale or your thumb on the scale, like the saying says, right, then you move things. This is like our bias going into our days, into our circumstances. When you bring a lot of bias and preconception, then it's like a thumb on the scale. We don't see it clearly. Joshu goes off to see the shopkeeper. It said he asks the same question, and then there's the same answer. But you wonder about that there, where Joshu walks off, and the elderly lady says, "Huh, another fine priest going off like that." What's his response? Is it the same as the monks? Is he consumed with doubt and worry? Oh, I'm going to go and have to ask my Dharma. I'm going to have to ask a Zen teacher about this. I'm going to have to go ask a Dharma teacher. I'm going to have. I don't know yet. But if there is doubt around the way, that's what we do. I like to seek um, consult mentors. I'm fortunate that I have a few mentors, not necessarily in the Dharma world, but just, I'm sure you do too, that it's just people who have this experience, have this wisdom, they can kind of ask things of. Just to get some input and to try and get feedback. You have to be careful, particularly for teachers, and if you're like in your profession or in your role, if you sit near the top of that profession or in that role, then it's difficult, very difficult, to actually get feedback that isn't skewed. It's really tough for Dharma teachers, and it can often cause a lot of problems, right? Because there's the hierarchy. Now I'm talking more about the Zen school here, right? So, but there's a hierarchy. So people will say what you want to hear, or say, yeah, or so there's that going on. So it's hard to be free of bias there. You have to go looking and really try and create some horizontal ground to get some feedback. Like Joshu here and the elderly shopkeeper, there's horizontal ground. Right? There's nothing recorded other than he said she said the same thing, and then he left. I like to think that, well, perhaps he could have kept walking. That would be one thing. What's the way to wisdom? Straight ahead, undoubtedly. You're going to go straight ahead whether we like it or not. Right? Life's like that. We're floating down the river, don't know what's around the bend, right? And then sometimes the water's really picking up, and now we're starting to move. And as human beings, we want to grab onto roots and boulders. It's trying, I don't know what's coming, right? So we try and these fix on these points, but we're always moving forward. We're always being taken forward. But if Joshua just keeps walking, well, that's fine. He can come back and say that. But I like to think maybe he just turned around and smiled or laughed out loud without breaking a step, and then just goes home. Later he brings all of as a teacher, and he brings all of the monks together. They're all, it's probably not much happening at the temple. So this is probably the big evening event. He's coming back from meeting the enlightened woman of Mount Tai. How did that go down? So everybody's waiting for the result. What did Joshu say? What did she do? And he replies very cryptically, I've seen through her for you. I've seen through her for you. And it's a curious statement, right? But then what is the role of Joshu? Joshu's a teacher in this case, but he's a teacher because he's gained experience and knowledge and good judgment, not by relying on the words of others, but of putting his cloak, putting his robe on and getting his staff and going out to find out for himself. In this case, that's the only way we gain realization is better understand this life and to practice and to come to understand the Dharma. You have to grab our staff, put on our traveling sandals, right? Maybe a hat, depending on, right? And then we head out, and find out for ourselves. Joshu comes back and says, I've done it for you. That's really the Buddha, Joshu, Dogen, and people, Maizumi Roshi in my tradition. They did it for me. I appreciate that. For all of us here, our teachers, our spiritual guides, and also our family, our ancestors, our community, they did it for us. They went forward already, right? Explored the territory, right? In order and gained that experience so we can benefit from their traveling, so we can benefit from that experience. And then what do we do with it? Rather than to sit and be, or to kind of talk about these matters of Dharma or enlightenment or, existential issues, sitting around or talking or trying to work it out, much better to just go straight ahead. Go straight ahead with who you are, the perfect one who you already are. With a good wooden staff in hand, right? So that's a good teaching, a good Dharma tradition. ICD is that wooden staff, right? And if we're going to go walking in the mountains, then it's always more fun with company. There's more support, there's friendship, and protection too, if we can all go forward together. And then we see what happens. We don't know the weather, Often these days you look and you just, in that sense, it looks like there's gloomy weather to come on on the weather report, right? But not always. Not always. The weather's always changing. That's a sure thing. And in the same way, whatever the circumstances we're moving through, they'll have their time, they arise, they come into being, they relent, and they disappear. But the journey and the exploration, that always continues. That always continues. There's a great founding teacher of Miyashinji in the Rinzai Zen tradition, an extraordinary practitioner, Kanzan Egan. He was when his teacher, who was the emperor, the shogun's teacher, like the emperor's teacher, when the emperor's teacher was passing away, the emperor said, who's you going to be your successor? And he said, there's one person, his name's Kanzan. But Kanzan had long since left the temple and he'd gone into complete anonymity. And he'd gone on pilgrimage into northern Japan. And he decided to he joined a small community in a village in his young 60s, and he took up peasant farming. And he didn't tell anybody about his prior life living at a Zen temple. So nobody knew who he was. He just got on with growing rice and living a simple life. And they had to search the whole country for him. Like they sent out messages to find Kanzan. And apparently, when they found him, the people he was working or living with were like, what? You know? And then he's the emperor's teacher. There's a lot in that. He didn't need a certificate or a title, right? And they bring him back, and he goes on to be the emperor's teacher. And at the end, very end of his life, in terms of this unending exploration and going forward, it said that he was ill, he was sick in bed, and he was near to passing, and it was just his close attendant. It's called the Jisha in the Zen tradition. And he asked his attendant, he said, step out of the room. I'll call you. And so he sent the attendant out, and there was a little pause. There's a little while goes by, and then he calls his attendant back into the room. And Kanzan had gotten with great difficulty, he'd gotten dressed into his traveling clothes once again, and he was stood holding his staff. And he said to his attendant, his close studying monk, "This is very important." And then it said he passed away standing up. A final teaching of just enormous effort and a great lesson. That story always gives me chills to see what's involved in to do that. So, in our practice of the Dharma, in our realization of practice, we have these great legendary figures who achieved enormous depth. We don't have to compare ourselves. I don't compare myself to Kanzan or Joshu or the Buddha. I'm living this life, right? We all came into this world with this lineage, with these ingredients, right? We've all arrived here, but it's for each one of us to discover ever more deeply who we already are and to trust that who we already are, to dig ever deeper into who we already are, who this one is, and then to go forward and to keep exploring with inquisitiveness. Like I talk about at the beginning of our sit-in practice. Have that mind that wants to see into things. Have that way of the explorer that wants to see what's beyond the edge of the map. Like going straight ahead. Okay. We have a little time. If I'd be happy to open it up for any questions, any comment, anything that you'd like to ask or share. I hope this koan was intriguing or interesting to you. Thank you, my friends. Let's take good care as we go straight ahead.